Hello again, how is everyone? I hope this lecture this week finds you all well and you're getting on so far with all the modules. I hope the last couple of lectures were okay and you were able to follow them, and of course I hope that the readings that I gave you were a good support to that as well. So today I suppose I'll just recap quickly on what we've actually done, because we're on the fourth week of this now. So just to recap, so basically I suppose the first week we looked at an outline of the module and what you're going to be doing, and I hope you still feel that this is following the outline that I gave you from the offset, and that I'll continue to follow it, okay, to a large extent. So we had a look at the outline of the module and what you're going to be doing and what's expected of you, and what the purpose of this particular module is and what it hopefully will support you to do. And in doing that, what we've looked at so far as part of that outline is the sociological frameworks and theories to support you to look at youth work. So we've had a look at feminism very briefly now, to be fair, but again I hope the readings that I've given you have helped you thrash out the theories and the frameworks a little bit better. So we've looked at the frameworks and the theories such as, like I said, feminism, conflict theory, functionalism, radical humanism. So we've looked at various theories and frameworks in regard to those, and hopefully you understand them a bit better, and they'll help you now as we go on to talk about youth work and what has happened in youth work and what is happening in youth work, okay? And like that, then we last week we looked at what is youth work, how do we define youth work, and like we saw, youth work isn't defined as the same thing in every country and every place, and we look at that a little bit more this week in regard to the history of youth work. Now, there are a lot of similarities between different countries and youth work, and we have it's built on pretty much the same principles and a lot of the same practices, but as we'll see, there's slight differences in between what we define as youth work, between maybe people in Ireland, people in Britain, but we also have similarities. So as we go on, hopefully what the frameworks and the theories will do will help you sort of differentiate between what is youth work, what's not youth work, what we do now that is youth work and that maybe isn't youth. So anyway, hold on to that question, I would say throughout, and in particular now over the next couple of lectures, what is youth work. So what we're going to do today, so the aim of this session, this particular session, is to look at the origins of youth work in a British and an Irish context. Okay, so let's just see where youth work has come from, where has it evolved from in the first place. And then next week, we're not forgetting you, Greece. I just can't fit in the three countries in 1 week, so in order to do them justice. So we'll have a look at Britain today, we'll have a look at Ireland, we'll have a look at Britain in this section, we'll have a look at Ireland in the next section, and then we'll go on and look at Greece then on week 5, okay? The purpose of this session is, this week and next week, is to start thinking about how you can start using the sociological frameworks and theories you've been learning about when you look at youth work's history, okay? So how we can start looking at, we can look at, say, Irish history and recognise what has happened in Irish history in regard to youth work, and apply a theory, one of the theories that we've looked at. So for example, like I put there, when you're looking at the history of youth work in Britain and Greece, can we look at it through the lens of conflict theory? So if you remember, conflict theory talked about the unequal distribution, predominantly the unequal distribution of power and resources. Can we look at the history of Britain, youth work in Britain and Greece, through this lens? Was there an unequal distribution of power and resources which influence youth work in some way? Or equally, can we look at the origins of Irish youth work using a functionalist perspective? So and we'll see more so as we move along, but you could ask, did Irish youth work evolve in order to attend to the church, or in response to the church, or was it something that came out of this idea of, suppose, shaping young people to be good citizens and to have a particular view on life which matched the view of the church, which would be a functionalist perspective. So anyway, they're just a couple of examples, and we'll see what you think about this. So, to begin with, the emergence of youth work in the UK. So, during the Industrial Revolution, and some of you might know this already, particularly those of you from Britain, the emergence of youth, and the idea of youth, and the idea of adolescence, of there being something called a teenager, emerged during the Industrial Revolution. So teenagers, youth, that age between 12 and 18 as such, was actually, during the new Industrial Revolution, something of a newly socially constructed group in society. So they were a group that were seen as too old to be children and too young to be adults, So they were seen as something called youth. So like that, before the Industrial Revolution, again, if anyone knows their history, basically you were a child, and then you went into work and you were an adult, and children were working at, like, as I said, children were actually working at 8, 9, 10. So there was no space to be what is now known as a teenager or an adolescent. So part of what changed, what brought on this newly socially constructed group, was things that changed in society at a broader level. And again, think your theoretical lens. So at a broader level, what was happening what was society doing? Think your functionalist perspective here. So societal changes brought introduction of holidays, education, regulated work hours, and an introduction of leisure time. So there was time off now. People could go on holidays now. People could go to school. There was more opportunities to go to school and be educated. So this brought about changes in culture, in how society saw themselves, and then how this age group, like I said, the sort of 11, 12 to 18, 19 age group saw themselves and what they were doing. So they were born out of this. So also what was happening at the time was that there was a middle class concern about the leisure time and habits of working class youth and juvenile crime statistics. Okay, so the middle class were getting a bit worried that, because they had more, this group in particular that were between being a child and being an adult had more leisure time, and they'd more time to have fun, and then possibly more time to be idle, and therefore were possibly getting into more trouble. This is what the middle class were identifying anyway. So there was a growth and a strength of working class organizations and socialism. Okay, so this was what was happening. So so they were the middle class were thinking, okay, so how do we quell this concern? Okay, how do we do something about this idle time and what the youth of today are getting up to, or what we now see as the adolescents of today? So this led to the first youth work initiatives by middle class and working class. Okay, so what you had was, what happened where youth work began to start happening was through church-based organizations, and these were pioneered by evangelical and Jewish communities. So this was happening in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. They were setting up organizations. This was a time when the social professions were really coming to the fore because of this concern about the poor and about the working class and about what was happening in society. So you had church groups setting up to go and help and try and spread the word. And if they spread the word of God, while also helping these young people that were maybe straying, as they saw, from society, they would be doing good for society. So like that, it was born out of philanthropic concern and generosity. So money was donated to different causes that were happening at the time as well in Britain. Things like Bernardo's would have been set up. So there was this concern about helping the poor, helping those who may be straying from society, and while helping them, trying to spread the word of God and bring them back into what it was, what these church groups and these religious societies saw as being a good citizen, and how really these poor people could be helped, and these young people that were going astray could be helped to be brought back into what it meant to be a good citizen and live a good life. So like it says there, this movement was motivated to preserve a certain type of status quo. Voluntary youth organisations were set up, and the focus was on predominantly urban, industrial and inner city areas at the time. So during this time, like we see, organisations were established, such as the YMCA, the Young Men Christian Association, the Boys Brigade, and then we saw the setting up of the Boy Scouts and the Girl Guides at the time as well. So, just moving on there. So youth work in the UK then. So this is where youth work evolved out of this concern for poor working class people at the time, to try and bring them back in, spread the word to them and bring them back into the status quo. So what happened was the state got involved early on in provision. Youth work became a statutory service, so it was something that was then funded as time went on, very much so in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Youth work became funded by the government, okay? So there was a move from a moral focus, so this religious focus, to a personal development focus. Now, in regard to the state getting involved, there has been criticisms in more recent times, in particular by Smith, who says that youth work has lost its essence as it's become run more and more so by the government, and the state has had more of a say over youth work, and it has actually lost its essence, what it was there for in the first place, its special characteristics, and is now used more within formal state institutions in regard to welfare and education. And you could argue that's possibly what is that. We look closer at Ireland, but you could argue that's possibly what's happened with Ireland as well, in that that sort of radical, or that sort of for the trying to, I suppose, spread the word for the good of society in youth work has been lost to an extent, and that youth work has possibly been taken on by government organisations in order to regulate it and keep it at a certain level. So Jeffson Smith, on the other hand, Tony Jeffson, Mark Smith, have argued that youth work was born and remains fundamentally a part of civil society, that it's wrapped up with associational life, community groups and voluntary organisations. And this is recognised then in Ireland, where youth work is defined in law. So I suppose there are critiques and there's pros and cons to youth work in Britain becoming part of a statutory service. Was it a good thing? Did it bring about positive progressions? Did it bring youth work back from what it should be, what it could be? And there's arguments to say both, that youth work worked really well as a statutory service. And as we look at the 1960s, 1970s, we're seen as somewhat of a golden age. There was a lot of money put into youth work, and there was a lot of things happening in youth work in the 1960s and 1970s as a statutory service. Now that changed in the 1980s and the 1990s, and we'll have a look at that. But just I suppose I'd encourage you to have a think about youth work at the moment, even in your own context, to think about where it's at and whether Yeah.